Lieutenant Sarah Chun had always been invisible, not because she tried to hide, but because people simply chose not to see her. At 28, she possessed the rare combination of brilliant analytical skills and the ability to blend into any environment without drawing attention. Her colleagues at Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado saw her as the quiet intelligence officer who processed reports and briefed teams before missions. They had no idea that behind her calm exterior lay one of the most perceptive minds the Navy had ever produced. Sarah's office sat tucked away in the corner of the intelligence wing, far from the main corridors where the SEALs walked with their trademark confidence. Her desk was organized with military precision, 3 monitors displaying various classified databases, encrypted communication channels, and satellite feed from operations around the globe. She preferred the solitude. It allowed her to focus on patterns that others missed, connections that seemed insignificant until viewed through her unique lens of analysis. The morning everything changed started like any other. Sarah arrived at 0630, 2 hours before her official duty time, carrying a large coffee and wearing her standard uniform of khaki slacks and a pressed blue shirt. She nodded to the security guard, badged through the multiple checkpoints, and settled at her workstation. The overnight intelligence summaries waited in her classified inbox, along with after-action reports from 3 different SEAL team operations that had concluded in the past 48 hours. As she reviewed the reports, something nagged at her. Operation Desert Falcon, conducted by SEAL Team 7, had experienced what the commanding officer described as unexpected enemy awareness. The target compound in Syria had been fortified beyond intelligence estimates, and the team had encountered organized resistance that suggested prior warning. 2 SEALs had been wounded, though both would recover. The mission succeeded, but barely. Sarah pulled up the operational timeline and began cross-referencing it with communication logs. Her training at the Defense Intelligence Agency had taught her to look for anomalies in data patterns, and something about the timing felt wrong. The enemy response had been too coordinated, too precise. Someone had known the SEALs were coming. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, accessing different databases. She pulled communication intercept from the National Security Agency, satellite imagery from the hours leading up to the operation, and detailed personnel files for everyone who had access to the mission parameters. The list was longer than she expected. Operational security had been maintained, but 17 people had possessed complete knowledge of the mission timeline, target location, and approach vectors. Sarah created a new file on her secure partition and began building timeline. She noted when each person had received the mission briefing, their access levels to various intelligence systems, and their recent activity patterns. Most showed normal behavior consistent with their roles. Commander Rodriguez had briefed his team according to standard protocols. Intelligence Specialist Thompson had provided updated satellite imagery. Communications Sergeant Williams had established encrypted channels with the Joint Operations Center. But Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb showed irregularities that made Sarah pause. Webb was a legendary figure in the SEAL community, a 20-year veteran with 4 Bronze Stars and 2 Silver Stars. His reputation for tactical excellence was matched only by his reputation for absolute loyalty to his brothers in arms. Yet the data suggested something different. Webb had accessed the mission files 6 times in the 24 hours before Operation Desert Falcon, far more than necessary for someone in his support role. Each access had lasted longer than normal, and the timing corresponded with gaps in his official schedule. More concerning, Webb's personal communication patterns had changed in the weeks leading up to the mission. Where he typically maintained minimal contact outside work hours, recent monitoring showed increased activity on encrypted messaging applications. Sarah leaned back in her chair, studying the information spread across her monitors. Accusing Marcus Webb of anything would be like suggesting Captain America was a double agent. Webb had trained many of the SEALs currently serving in active combat zones. His tactical innovations had saved countless lives. The idea that he might be compromising operations seemed impossible. Yet the data told a story that Sarah couldn't ignore. She pulled Webb's complete service record, searching for any indication of financial stress, personal problems, or ideological shifts. His finances appeared stable, his family relationship strong. He owned a modest home near the base, drove a 10-year-old truck, and lived within his military salary. Nothing suggested the typical motivations for betrayal. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from her supervisor, Commander Patricia Hayes. Intelligence briefing moved to 0900. New priority tasking. Sarah glanced at the clock. She had 30 minutes to prepare whatever Hayes needed, but she couldn't shake her focus from the web anomaly. She created a backup copy of her analysis on an encrypted thumb drive and locked her workstation. The briefing room buzzed with activity when Sarah arrived. Representatives from multiple teams filled the chairs around the polished conference table. At the head of the room, Commander Hayes stood beside a large screen displaying a map of Eastern Europe. The mission parameters appeared complex, involving multiple insertion points and coordination with allied forces. Intelligence indicates a high-value target will be meeting with arms dealers in Romania. Hayes explained, clicking through satellite imagery. We have a narrow window for interdiction. SEAL Team 5 will conduct the primary operation, with support from local assets. Sarah took notes automatically, but her mind remained focused on the web situation. As Hayes detailed the operational timeline, Sarah noticed something that made her stomach tighten. Webb was listed as the senior enlisted advisor for this mission, giving him complete access to all tactical plans. After the briefing, Sarah approached Commander Hayes privately. "Ma'am, I need to discuss a potential security concern." Hayes looked up from her tablet, studying Sarah's expression. Hayes was known for her ability to read people, a skill that had served her well in 25 years of naval intelligence. "Walk with me, Lieutenant." They moved to Hayes's office, a space decorated with commendations and photographs from deployments around the world. Hayes closed the door and gestured for Sarah to sit across from her desk. "What's on your mind, Sean?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "I've been analyzing the Desert Falcon after-action reports and found some irregularities in the intelligence timeline. Someone with high-level access may have compromised the operation." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "That's a serious accusation. Do you have evidence?" Sarah handed over a printed summary of her analysis, highlighting the key timing discrepancies and access patterns. She watched Hayes read through the document, her expression remaining neutral. "This data suggests multiple people had the opportunity to leak information," Hayes observed. "What makes you focus on one particular individual?" "The pattern of access doesn't match normal operational requirements," Sarah explained. "Combined with changes in personal communication patterns, it suggests someone was gathering and potentially transmitting information outside normal channels." Hayes set down the report and looked directly at Sarah. "The person you're investigating is Senior Chief Webb, isn't it?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Marcus Webb is a decorated veteran with an impeccable service record. His loyalty to the teams is unquestioned." "Are you absolutely certain about this?" The weight of accusation felt heavy in the room. Sarah understood the implications of what she was suggesting. If she was wrong, her career would effectively end. If she was right, one of the most respected SEALs in the community was betraying his brothers. "I'm not certain about anything yet," Sarah replied. "But the data suggests further investigation is warranted. If we're planning another operation and there's a security breach, more lives could be at risk." Hayes nodded slowly. "What do you recommend?" Sarah had already considered this question. Limited surveillance of communication patterns and a controlled information test. We could provide different mission details to different individuals and monitor for any unauthorized disclosures. "That's essentially a counterintelligence operation against our own personnel," Hayes pointed out. "The authorization level for that kind of investigation is significant." "Yes, ma'am. But if someone is compromising SEAL operations, we need to identify them before the next mission." Hayes picked up her secure phone. "I'll need to discuss this with Admiral Morrison. In the meantime, continue your analysis, but keep this information strictly compartmented. No one else needs to know about your suspicions." Sarah left Hayes' office with mixed feelings. She had set something in motion that couldn't be undone. Either she would help identify a serious security threat, or she would destroy the reputation of a decorated veteran based on circumstantial evidence. The responsibility felt overwhelming. Back at her desk, Sarah continued building her case file. She accessed Webb's complete digital footprint within the classified networks, looking for any additional anomalies. What she found made her more concerned. Webb had been accessing intelligence files for operations he wasn't directly involved in, including missions conducted by teams stationed at other bases. The pattern suggested someone building a comprehensive picture of SEAL capabilities and operational procedures. If Webb was passing information to hostile forces, the damage could extend far beyond single mission compromises. Enemy forces could be learning how SEALs operated at a fundamental level, developing countermeasures that would put every team at risk. Sarah's secure phone rang, displaying Commander Hayes' extension. "Lieutenant Shun, report to my office immediately." The tone suggested urgency. Sarah locked her workstation and hurried through the corridors. When she arrived at Hayes' office, Admiral Morrison was present along with two men she didn't recognize wearing civilian clothes, but carrying themselves with obvious military bearing. "Lieutenant Shun," Admiral Morrison said, "these gentlemen are from the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Commander Hayes has briefed me on your concerns. We're going to need you to walk us through everything you've discovered." The NCIS agents introduced themselves as Special Agent David Park and Special Agent Jennifer Martinez. Park was a thin man with sharp eyes who took careful notes on everything Sarah said. Martinez asked most of the questions, her approach methodical and thorough. They spent 3 hours going through Sarah's analysis in detail, examining every piece of evidence she had compiled. "This is circumstantial," Agent Martinez observed after reviewing the access logs. "Suspicious, but not conclusive. We need something more definitive before we can take action against someone of Webb's standing." Admiral Morrison leaned forward in his chair. "What do you propose?" Agent Park closed his notebook. "We need a controlled test. Lieutenant Chin's suggestion about compartmented information could work, but we need to be extremely careful. If Webb is innocent and discovers we're investigating him, the damage to unit cohesion would be significant. And if he's guilty and we don't catch him," Commander Hayes added, "more SEALs could die on the next operation." Admiral Morrison stood, moving to the window that overlooked the training compound where SEAL candidates struggled through obstacle courses. "How long would this investigation take?" 2 weeks, minimum, Agent Martinez replied. "We need to establish surveillance, set up the information compartmentalization, and monitor results. But, sir, we should also consider that Webb might not be working alone." This possibility hadn't occurred to Sarah, and she felt a chill run through her. If multiple people within the special operations community were compromising missions, the security breach was far worse than anyone had imagined. Agent Park opened his laptop and began pulling up files. "Lieutenant Shun, we're going to need you to continue your analysis, but now you'll be working directly with our investigation. Everything you discover needs to be reported immediately. Can you handle that level of responsibility?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, sir." "Good. We're also going to need you to act completely normal around Webb and anyone else you might suspect. No changes in behavior, no additional questions, no indication that anything is different. Think you can manage that?" The thought of sitting in briefings with someone who might be betraying her colleagues made Sarah's stomach turn, but she understood the necessity. "I can do it." Over the next week, Sarah lived a double life. During the day, she attended briefings, processed intelligence reports, and interacted with personnel exactly as she always had. But every evening, she met with the NCIS agents in a secure room in the base's counterintelligence facility. Together, they built an increasingly detailed picture of potential security breaches. The controlled information test was implemented through a fictional operation called Neptune's Trident. Different versions of the operational plan were provided to different personnel, each containing unique details that would allow investigators to trace any leaks. Webb received information indicating the operation would take place in Lebanon. Other key personnel received versions placing the mission in Jordan, Syria, or Turkey. While they waited for results, Sarah expanded her analysis, to include other personnel who had access to compromised operations. What she found was disturbing. Gunnery Sergeant Kevin Palmer, a communications specialist, showed similar irregular access patterns. His personal financial situation was more concerning than Webb's. Palmer had recently purchased a new car and made a down payment on a house that seemed beyond his military salary. Additionally, Palmer's ex-wife lived in a country that maintained hostile relations with the United States. Their divorce had been contentious, involving custody disputes over their 2 children. Sarah wondered if Palmer might be vulnerable to coercion or if personal resentment might have made him susceptible to recruitment by foreign agents. When Sarah presented this information to the NCIS team, Agent Martinez's expression grew serious. A potential network is emerging here. If Webb and Palmer are working together, they could be covering for each other, making detection more difficult. Agent Park pulled up Palmer's complete service record. Palmer has been stationed with multiple SEAL teams over the past 8 years. If he's been compromising operations, the damage could be extensive. Sarah spent the next several days analyzing Palmer's access patterns and comparing them with mission compromises. What she discovered made her realize the scope of the problem was larger than anyone had suspected. Palmer had been present during the planning phases of 6 operations over the past 2 years that had experienced unexpected enemy resistance or other complications suggesting prior warning. Meanwhile, the Neptune's Trident test was producing results. Signals intelligence had detected encrypted communications from the base to an overseas location that occurred shortly after Webb received his version of the operational plan. The timing was too precise to be coincidental. When Agent Martinez briefed Admiral Morrison on these developments, his reaction was swift and decisive. We need to move to active surveillance immediately. If we're dealing with a network, we need to identify all participants before they realize we're onto them. The surveillance operation required careful coordination. NCIS agents established discreet monitoring of both Webb and Palmer, tracking their movements, communications, and contacts. Sarah continued her analytical work, now focusing on identifying other potential network members. What she discovered over the next few days painted a picture of a sophisticated espionage operation. Webb and Palmer weren't acting randomly or independently. Their activities showed coordination and planning that suggested professional training in intelligence operations. Someone had recruited them systematically and provided them with the tools and knowledge necessary to extract and transmit classified information without detection. The breakthrough came when surveillance teams observed Webb meeting with an unknown individual at a restaurant 15 miles from a base. The meeting appeared casual, 2 men having lunch and discussing what seemed like normal topics. But the conversation lasted exactly 47 minutes, and hidden cameras captured Webb passing a small object to the other man under the table. NCIS ran the unknown individual's photograph through facial recognition databases and discovered his true identity. Dr. Alexei Petrov, a supposed cultural attaché at a foreign consulate, was actually a senior intelligence officer with extensive experience in recruiting and running military assets. Agent Park showed Sarah the surveillance photographs in a secure briefing room. This confirms our worst fears. Webb isn't just leaking information for money or personal reasons. He's been recruited as part of a professional intelligence operation. Sarah studied the images, feeling a mixture of vindication and sadness. Her analysis had been correct, but proving it meant acknowledging that a decorated veteran had betrayed everything he had sworn to protect. What happens now, she asked. Now we determined the full extent of the network, Agent Martinez replied. We need to identify everyone involved before we make arrests. If we move too quickly, other members might escape or destroy evidence. The investigation continued for another week. During this time, Sarah maintained her normal routine while secretly documenting everything the NCIS team discovered. Palmer was also under full surveillance, and investigators observed him making similar contact with foreign agents. More concerning, surveillance revealed that both Webb and Palmer had been photographing classified documents using sophisticated microcameras. The scope of the intelligence breach was staggering. Over the course of 2 years, Webb and Palmer had provided foreign agents with detailed information about SEAL training procedures, operational tactics, equipment specifications, and mission plans. They had essentially given hostile forces a comprehensive guide to American special operations capabilities. Sarah's analysis helped investigators understand how the recruitment had occurred. Both Webb and Palmer had financial vulnerabilities that made them attractive targets. Foreign intelligence services had approached them gradually, building relationships and providing money for what initially seemed like harmless information sharing. Over time, the request became more serious and the payments larger until both men were fully committed to espionage activities. The investigation also revealed that the network extended beyond Webb and Palmer. A civilian contractor who maintained computer systems at the base had been providing technical support for the espionage operation, helping to cover digital tracks and avoid detection. Additionally, a retired SEAL who now worked as a defense contractor had been sharing information about new equipment and training procedures. When Admiral Morrison received the complete briefing on the network's activities, his anger was carefully controlled but clearly visible. These men have put every SEAL team in danger. They betrayed not just their country, but their brothers who trusted them with their lives. Agent Martinez nodded. Sir, we're ready to make arrests, but we recommend doing so simultaneously to prevent any members from escaping or warning others. Do it, Admiral Morrison ordered. And I want a complete damage assessment. We need to know exactly what information was compromised and how it might affect current and future operations. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and apprehension as the investigation moved toward its conclusion. Her quiet analysis had uncovered one of the most serious security breaches in naval special warfare history. But she also knew that the arrest would send shockwaves through the SEAL community and beyond. The next morning, Sarah arrived at work to find the base buzzing with unusual activity. NCIS agents and military police were conducting searches and making arrests. The comfortable routine of the intelligence office had been shattered by the reality of the investigation's findings. Commander Hayes found Sarah at her desk, reviewing reports from overnight intelligence summaries. Lieutenant Chun, Admiral Morrison wants to see you immediately. Admiral Morrison's office was more crowded than Sarah had ever seen it. Besides the Admiral and Commander Hayes, the room contained the base commanding officer, the SEAL team commanders, and several high-ranking officials she didn't recognize, but whose bearings suggested they came from Washington. Agent Martinez stood near the front of the room, holding a thick briefing folder. Lieutenant Chun, Admiral Morrison began, thanks to your analytical work, we've uncovered and disrupted a significant espionage network that has been operating within our command for over 2 years. The arrests were made simultaneously at 0600 this morning. Sarah felt the weight of everyone's attention focused on her. Several of the SEAL commanders were studying her with expressions that mixed surprise and respect. She had been invisible to most of them just days ago, but now they were learning that her quiet work had potentially saved lives. Agent Martinez stepped forward. The evidence Lieutenant Chun compiled was instrumental in identifying the network members and understanding their methods. Without her initial analysis, this operation could have continued indefinitely, compromising additional missions and putting more personnel at risk. One of the men Sarah didn't recognize spoke up. I'm Deputy Director Collins from the Defense Intelligence Agency. Lieutenant Chun, your work on this investigation has been exceptional. The analytical techniques you use to identify the anomalies in access patterns and communication behaviors are exactly the kind of skills we need in the intelligence community. Sarah nodded respectfully. Thank you, sir. I was just doing my job. No, Admiral Morrison interrupted. You did much more than your job. You identified a pattern that others missed and had the courage to pursue it even when it pointed to respected members of our community. That takes both skill and character. Commander Hayes handed Sarah a folder. The damage assessment is still ongoing, but Preliminary results show that the compromised information affected at least 12 operations over the past 2 years. The enemy preparations we observed weren't just lucky guesses. They were the result of detailed intelligence about our tactics and procedures. Sarah opened the folder and scanned the summary. The scope of the betrayal was even worse than she had imagined. Webb and Palmer had provided foreign agents with information about SEAL training facilities, personnel rosters, equipment specifications, and operational procedures. They had essentially given hostile forces a roadmap for countering American special operations. The good news, Agent Martinez added, is that we caught them before they could compromise the Romania operation. The mission proceeded successfully with no unexpected enemy resistance. One of the SEAL commanders, a weathered man with graying hair and numerous combat deployations, spoke directly to Sarah. "Lieutenant, I owe you an apology. I've walked past your office hundreds of times and never paid attention to the work you were doing. Now I understand that work was protecting my teams." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Sir, everyone here contributes to mission success. I just happened to notice something that needed investigation." "Don't minimize what you accomplished," Admiral Morrison said firmly. "Your analysis uncovered a sophisticated espionage operation that had successfully evaded detection for years. The methods they used were professional grade, designed specifically to avoid the kind of detection we normally use." Deputy Director Collins opened his own folder and pulled out several documents. "Lieutenant Shun, I'd like to discuss your future career options. The Defense Intelligence Agency has a critical need for analysts with your capabilities. We're prepared to offer you a position that would allow you to work on threats to special operations forces across all service branches." Sarah was surprised by the offer. She had never considered leaving the Navy, but the opportunity to work on protecting special operations personnel was appealing. "Sir, I appreciate the offer, but I'd like to continue serving here if possible. I understand this community and the threats they face." Admiral Morrison smiled. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. Lieutenant Shun, I'm recommending you for promotion to Lieutenant Commander and assignment as the Senior Intelligence Officer for Special Operations Security. Your job will be to develop new methods for detecting insider threats and protecting our personnel from the kind of compromise we just uncovered." The assignment was more responsibility than Sarah had ever imagined having. She would be working directly with SEAL teams, developing security protocols, and analyzing threats that could affect operations worldwide. It was also recognition that her quiet analytical work had value beyond processing routine intelligence reports. Agent Martinez handed Sarah another folder. "This contains the complete case file on the espionage network. You'll need to understand their methods thoroughly to develop countermeasures. The techniques they used to avoid detection were sophisticated, and we need to assume other hostile intelligence services have similar capabilities." Sarah spent the rest of the morning in briefings, learning details about the investigation that went far beyond her initial analysis. Webb had been recruited during a deployment to Eastern Europe 3 years earlier, when foreign agents had identified his gambling debts and offered to help with his financial problems. Palmer's recruitment had been more complex, involving threats to his children who lived overseas with his ex-wife. Both men had been trained in tradecraft, taught how to photograph documents without detection, how to communicate securely with their handlers, and how to avoid behavioral changes that might raise suspicion. Their foreign contacts had been patient, allowing them to establish patterns of access and information sharing that appeared normal to casual observation. The civilian contractor, Robert Kim, had been recruited through a different approach. Foreign agents had approached him through online gaming communities, gradually building a relationship based on shared interests before introducing requests for information. Kim had provided technical assistance, helping Webb and Palmer cover their digital tracks and avoid detection by network monitoring systems. The retired SEAL, Master Chief Tom Harrison, had been the most damaging member of the network. His post-retirement work as a defense contractor gave him access to information about new equipment and training procedures that active duty personnel didn't receive. He had been passing detailed specifications for new weapons systems and tactical innovations to foreign agents for over 18 months. As Sarah reviewed the complete case file, she began to understand how the recruitment and operation had succeeded for so long. The Foreign Intelligence Service had studied American military culture and identified vulnerabilities that traditional counterintelligence methods didn't address. They had targeted people with access, identified personal weaknesses, and exploited those weaknesses with professional skill. More importantly, they had recognized that the special operations community's culture of trust and brotherhood made it resistant to internal security measures that might be routine in other military environments. SEALs trusted each other implicitly, and that trust had been weaponized against them. Sarah's new assignment would require her to develop security measures that protected against these threats without destroying the culture of trust that made SEAL teams effective. It was a delicate balance, and she understood that her success would affect the lives of operators in combat zones around the world. That afternoon, Sarah met with the SEAL team commanders to discuss immediate security changes. The meeting was held in a conference room normally reserved for mission planning, and the atmosphere was tense. These were men accustomed to facing external threats, but the idea of betrayal from within their own ranks was difficult to accept. Commander Jake Sullivan, leader of SEAL Team 7, spoke first. "Lieutenant Shun, what you discovered changes how we think about operational security. But we can't let paranoia destroy unit cohesion. How do we protect against insider threats without turning every operator into a potential suspect?" Sarah had been considering this question since her promotion was announced. "Sir, I believe the answer lies in better understanding normal patterns and identifying deviations early. Most insider threats develop gradually, and there are usually warning signs if we know what to look for." Commander Maria Rodriguez of SEAL Team 5 nodded. "What kind of warning signs?" "Changes in behavior, financial stress, unusual interest in information outside their normal responsibilities, and modifications to their digital activities," Sarah explained. "The key is establishing baseline patterns for each individual and monitoring for significant deviations." Commander Sullivan looked concerned. "That sounds like we'd be spying on our own people." "Not spying," Sarah replied carefully, "but being aware. The same situational awareness you use in combat situations applied to recognizing when someone might be vulnerable to recruitment or coercion." Agent Martinez, who had remained in the meeting to provide investigative perspective, added her thoughts. "The network we just disrupted succeeded because they understood your culture and exploited it. They knew that SEALs don't typically question each other's activities or motivations. That trust is valuable, but it can also be a vulnerability." Commander Rodriguez asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "How do we know there aren't other networks we haven't discovered yet?" Sarah pulled out a chart she had prepared showing access patterns and communication anomalies across the entire special operations community. "I've been analyzing data from all our bases and haven't found indicators of additional networks. But that doesn't mean they don't exist. It means we need to develop better methods for detecting them." The discussion continued for 2 hours, covering everything from background investigation procedures to communication monitoring protocols. Sarah presented a comprehensive plan for enhancing security without compromising operational effectiveness. The plan included regular analytical reviews, automated monitoring of access patterns, and enhanced personnel security programs. As the meeting concluded, Commander Sullivan approached Sarah directly. "Lieutenant, I want you to know that every SEAL in this command owes you a debt. Webb and Palmer put our people at risk, and you stopped them. That won't be forgotten." Walking back to her office, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in just 2 weeks. She had gone from being an invisible analyst to being the architect of a new security program that would affect special operations forces worldwide. The responsibility was daunting, but she felt ready to meet the challenge. Her secure phone buzzed with a message from Admiral Morrison. "Lieutenant Shun, report to my office at 1600. The Secretary of the Navy would like to speak with you." Sarah checked the time. She had 30 minutes to prepare for what would likely be the most important meeting of her career. As she organized her thoughts and gathered her materials, she realized that her days of being invisible were definitively over. The quiet analyst who had noticed something others missed was about to become a key figure in protecting America's most elite warriors. The Secretary of the Navy's visit had transformed the base into a flurry of activity. Security personnel established additional checkpoints, communications teams tested encrypted systems, and senior officers hurried through corridors with urgent expressions. Sarah had never been this close to someone of such high rank, and she spent the 30 minutes before her meeting reviewing every detail of the investigation to ensure she could answer any questions. When she arrived at Admiral Morrison's office, she found it had been converted into a temporary secure briefing facility. The Secretary of the Navy, Margaret Chin Williams, was a former submarine commander who had earned respect throughout the military for her strategic thinking and direct communication style. She sat at the head of the conference table, flanked by staff members and security officials. "Lieutenant Chun," Secretary Chin Williams began, "Admiral Morrison has briefed me on your exceptional work in uncovering this espionage network. I wanted to meet you personally and understand how you identified a threat that had been operating undetected for years." Sarah stood at attention. "Ma'am, I was analyzing after-action reports and noticed inconsistencies in intelligence timelines. The patterns suggested someone with access was providing advance warning to hostile forces." "Walk me through your analytical process," the Secretary requested. "I want to understand exactly how you connected data points that others had missed." For the next hour, Sarah explained her methodology, from initial observation through final confirmation of the espionage network. She described the database queries, the pattern analysis, and the behavioral indicators that had led her to suspect Webb and Palmer. Secretary Chin Williams asked detailed questions, clearly understanding the technical aspects of intelligence analysis. "Your background includes a master's degree in data science from MIT," the Secretary noted, reviewing Sarah's personnel file. "How did those skills translate to counterintelligence work?" "Ma'am, intelligence analysis involves finding meaningful patterns in large amounts of data," Sarah explained. "The techniques for identifying anomalies in network traffic or financial transactions are similar to those used for detecting unusual behavior in classified systems or personnel access patterns." One of the Secretary's staff members, a civilian who appeared to be a senior intelligence official, leaned forward. "Lieutenant Chun, the methods you used suggest capabilities that could be valuable beyond just the SEAL community. Have you considered how these techniques might apply to broader military intelligence challenges?" Sarah had been thinking about exactly this question since her promotion was announced. "Sir, insider threats exist throughout the military and intelligence communities. The same analytical approaches could be applied to protecting information in any high-security environment." Secretary Chin Williams nodded approvingly. "That's precisely what we need to discuss. Lieutenant Chun, the Department of Defense is establishing a new office focused specifically on insider threat detection and prevention. This office will work across all service branches and with civilian intelligence agencies to develop comprehensive security measures." Admiral Morrison added, "Lieutenant Chun has been offered a position with the Defense Intelligence Agency, but I've recommended that she lead the Insider Threat Program for Naval Special Warfare Command. Her understanding of SEAL operations and culture makes her uniquely qualified for this role." "Both positions are important," Secretary Chin Williams acknowledged, "but I believe Lieutenant Chin's talents could serve an even broader purpose." She turned to face Sarah directly. "How would you feel about leading the Department of Defense's new Insider Threat Detection Center? The position would be based in Washington, and you'd be working directly with the Secretary of Defense's office." The offer was beyond anything Sarah had imagined. Leading a Pentagon-level program would give her the resources and authority to develop insider threat detection capabilities that could protect military personnel throughout the world. It would also mean leaving the SEAL community where she had found her calling. "Ma'am, I'm honored by the offer," Sarah replied carefully. "Could I ask about the scope and timeline for this program?" Secretary Chin Williams opened a briefing folder and handed Sarah several documents. The program would focus on three main areas: developing automated systems for detecting unusual behavior patterns, training personnel to recognize insider threat indicators, and coordinating with intelligence agencies to identify recruitment attempts before they succeed. Sarah reviewed the documents quickly, noting the substantial budget and personnel allocations. The program would have access to the Defense Department's most advanced analytical tools and would work directly with the FBI, CIA, and NSA on insider threat issues. The timeline is aggressive, the secretary continued. We want the basic framework operational within 6 months, with full implementation within 2 years. The recent network you uncovered has highlighted vulnerabilities that we can't afford to ignore. Admiral Morrison looked at Sarah with an expression that mixed pride and concern. Lieutenant, this is a tremendous opportunity, but I want you to understand what you'd be giving up. Working in Washington means leaving the operational intelligence community where you've found success. Sarah appreciated the Admiral's honesty. She had developed strong relationships with the SEAL teams and enjoyed the direct connection between her analytical work and mission success. But the Pentagon position would allow her to protect military personnel across all service branches, potentially saving many more lives. Ma'am, Sarah addressed Secretary Chin Williams, would this position include opportunities to maintain connection with operational units? I believe the most effective insider threat programs require understanding of the communities they're designed to protect. Absolutely, the secretary replied. The program would include regular visits to operational bases and direct collaboration with unit commanders. You wouldn't be isolated in Washington bureaucracy. This would be hands-on development and implementation of security measures. One of the staff members handed Sarah another document. This is a preliminary organizational chart showing how the Insider Threat Detection Center would interact with existing security offices. You'll note that you'd have direct access to personnel from all service branches and civilian agencies. Sarah studied the organizational structure, impressed by the scope of authority and resources. The position would allow her to develop comprehensive solutions rather than addressing threats only within the SEAL community. Secretary Chin Williams checked her watch. Lieutenant Chun, I understand this is a significant decision that will affect your entire career. I don't need an answer today, but I would like your decision within the week. Admiral Morrison has recommended you highly, and your work on this investigation demonstrates exactly the kind of analytical thinking we need. After the secretary and her staff departed, Sarah remained in Admiral Morrison's office to discuss the opportunity privately. The Admiral was clearly proud of her accomplishments, but seemed conflicted about losing her to a Pentagon assignment. Sarah, he said, using her first name for the first time, this is the kind of opportunity that comes once in a career. But you need to be certain it's what you want. Washington assignments can be politically challenging, and you'd be working in an environment very different from operational intelligence. Sarah had been considering this concern since the secretary made her offer. Sir, do you think the work would be meaningful? Not just bureaucratic exercises, but actually protecting people. Based on what I know about the secretary's priorities and the current threat environment, yes, Admiral Morrison replied. The insider threat problem extends far beyond what we discovered here. If you can develop effective countermeasures, you could prevent compromises that affect operations worldwide. That evening, Sarah walked along the beach near the base, watching SEAL candidates struggle through surf training in the fading daylight. The sight reminded her why she had been drawn to supporting special operations forces. These were people who risked their lives on dangerous missions, and they deserved the best possible protection from threats both foreign and domestic. Her secure phone buzzed with a call from Agent Martinez. Lieutenant Chun, I wanted to update you on the interrogations. Webb and Palmer are providing detailed information about their recruitment and activities. The intelligence they're sharing will help us understand how foreign services target military personnel. Have they revealed anything about other potential networks? Sarah asked. Not yet, but their handlers' methods were sophisticated enough that we have to assume similar operations are targeting other military communities. The techniques they use could easily be adapted to recruit personnel in Air Force Special Operations, Army Rangers, or Marine Special Operations units. This possibility reinforced Sarah's sense that the Pentagon position might be the right choice. Working within the SEAL community had allowed her to develop expertise in insider threat detection, but applying that expertise more broadly could protect many more people. Agent Martinez, based on what you've learned from the investigation, how serious is the insider threat problem across the military? Serious enough that the Secretary of Defense has made it a top priority, Martinez replied. The techniques these foreign services are using are becoming more sophisticated, and they're specifically targeting people with access to sensitive information about military capabilities. Sarah spent the rest of the evening researching the Pentagon position, reading about the Department of Defense's insider threat initiatives, and the resources available for developing new security measures. The more she learned, the more convinced she became that this was an opportunity to make a significant difference in protecting military personnel. The next morning, Sarah met with Commander Hayes to discuss her decision and its implications for the Naval Special Warfare Intelligence Program. "Commander," Sarah began, "I've been offered the Pentagon position, and I'm strongly considering accepting it." Hayes nodded. "I expected as much. It's an exceptional opportunity, and you've earned it through outstanding work. But we'll miss having you here." "Ma'am, I believe the work in Washington could benefit the SEAL community even if I'm not physically present," Sarah explained. Developing comprehensive insider threat detection capabilities could protect SEALs and other special operations forces more effectively than working within a single command. "You're probably right," Hayes agreed. "And honestly, your career potential is much greater in Washington. You've demonstrated analytical capabilities that deserve broader application." That afternoon, Sarah called Secretary Chin-Williams' office to schedule a meeting to discuss accepting the position. She felt confident about her decision, but wanted to understand the specific expectations and timeline before making a final commitment. The conversation with the Secretary's Chief of Staff confirmed that the position would offer significant resources and authority to develop innovative insider threat detection methods. Sarah would be working with the best analytical tools available to the Defense Department and collaborating with experts from throughout the intelligence community. As she prepared to accept what would likely be the most important assignment of her career, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since the morning she first noticed irregularities in Marcus Webb's access patterns. The quiet analyst who had been invisible to most of her colleagues was about to become one of the Defense Department's key figures in protecting military personnel from insider threats. 6 months later, Sarah stood in a briefing room in the Pentagon, addressing an audience that included the Secretary of Defense, service chiefs, and intelligence directors from throughout the government. The Insider Threat Detection Center had exceeded all expectations, developing analytical capabilities that had already identified and disrupted 3 additional espionage networks across different military branches. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah began, clicking to her first slide, "the methods developed by this center have proven effective in identifying insider threats before they can compromise operations. Our automated monitoring systems have flagged over 200 individuals for further investigation, resulting in the discovery of security vulnerabilities that range from minor policy violations to active espionage." The presentation detailed the center's accomplishments over its first 6 months of operation. Sarah's team had developed machine learning algorithms that could identify suspicious behavior patterns in personnel access logs, communication systems, and financial records. More importantly, they had created training programs that taught security personnel and unit commanders how to recognize early warning signs of insider threat activity. Secretary of Defense Robert Patterson asked the first question. "Commander Chun, what have we learned about the scale of the insider threat problem across the military?" Sarah had been promoted to commander upon accepting the Pentagon position, recognition of both her achievements and the importance of her new role. "Sir, our analysis suggests that hostile intelligence services have been conducting systematic recruitment operations targeting military personnel for at least 5 years. The network we uncovered at Naval Special Warfare Command was just one of several similar operations. She clicked to the next slide, showing a map with indicators at military installations across the United States and overseas. We've identified evidence of recruitment attempts at 17 different bases, affecting all service branches. The methods are consistent with professional intelligence operations, suggesting coordination at a high level. General Patricia Kim, the Army Chief of Staff, leaned forward. Commander Chun, how effective are these recruitment attempts? Are we seeing successful penetration of our security? Ma'am, approximately 15% of recruitment attempts appear to succeed in establishing ongoing relationships with military personnel, Sarah replied. However, most of these relationships don't progress to actual espionage activity. The foreign services appear to be building networks of contacts that can be activated when specific intelligence requirements arise. Admiral Morrison, who had traveled from Coronado for the briefing, added his perspective. The success rate might seem low, but when you consider the potential damage from even one successful recruitment, the threat is significant. The Web Palmer network alone compromised dozens of operations over 2 years. CIA Director Michael Torres asked about coordination between agencies. Commander Chun, how has interagency cooperation affected your ability to detect and counter these threats? Sir, the coordination has been essential, Sarah acknowledged. The FBI provides investigative support, the CIA shares intelligence about foreign recruitment operations, and the NSA provides technical capabilities for monitoring communications. Without this cooperation, many threats would go undetected. Sarah had spent considerable time developing relationships with analysts and investigators throughout the intelligence community. The Insider Threat Detection Center served as a coordination hub, sharing information and analytical techniques that helped all agencies protect their personnel. The presentation continued with detailed case studies of disrupted networks. In addition to the Naval Special Warfare case, Sarah's team had uncovered an Air Force network that was providing information about stealth aircraft capabilities, an Army network that was compromising special operations planning, and a Marine Corps network that was sharing intelligence about amphibious assault procedures. The patterns are remarkably similar across all services, Sarah explained. Foreign services identify personnel with access to sensitive information, research their personal and financial situations, and approach them through seemingly innocent social contacts. The recruitment process is gradual, building trust and dependency before requesting classified information. Secretary Patterson asked about countermeasures. What can we do to prevent these recruitments from succeeding? Sarah clicked to a slide titled Prevention Strategies. Sir, our research indicates that education and early intervention are the most effective countermeasures. Personnel who understand recruitment techniques are much less likely to fall victim to them. Additionally, providing support for financial difficulties and personal problems reduces vulnerability to coercion. She detailed the center's prevention programs, which included mandatory training for all personnel with security clearances, financial counseling services, and enhanced support for military families dealing with deployment stress and other challenges. General Torres asked about the technical aspects of detection. Commander Chun, how do your automated systems identify suspicious behavior without generating excessive false positives? Sir, we use machine learning algorithms that establish baseline patterns for each individual and flag significant deviations, Sarah explained. The system considers multiple factors including access patterns, communication behavior, financial activity, and social connections. No single indicator triggers an investigation, but combinations of suspicious activities generate alerts for human analysts. The technical presentation was detailed, covering the mathematical models, data sources, and analytical procedures that made the system effective. Sarah had worked with computer scientists and data analysts from throughout the Defense Department to develop capabilities that could process vast amounts of information while respecting privacy rights and operational requirements. Agent Martinez, now serving as the FBI liaison to the center, provided the law enforcement perspective. The analytical products from Commander Chen's team have been instrumental in developing cases that will stand up in court. The evidence collection methods are legally sound, and the analysis provides clear documentation of criminal activity. As the briefing concluded, Secretary Patterson asked about future plans. Commander Chun, where do you see this program going over the next year? Sir, we're developing capabilities to share our analytical methods with allied nations, Sarah replied. The insider threat problem affects all military forces that operate advanced technology and sensitive information. By helping our allies develop similar detection capabilities, we can reduce the effectiveness of hostile intelligence operations worldwide. Sarah also outlined plans for expanding the program to cover civilian contractors and other personnel who worked with classified military information. The insider threat extended beyond active-duty military personnel to include anyone with access to sensitive information about military capabilities and operations. After the briefing, Sarah met privately with Admiral Morrison to discuss how the program had affected the SEAL community specifically. The enhanced security measures have been implemented without destroying unit cohesion, and several potential insider threats have been identified and addressed before they could compromise operations. Sarah, the SEALs owe you more than they'll ever know, Admiral Morrison said. The security program you developed has become the model for special operations forces worldwide. Your quiet analysis has protected warriors in dozens of countries. The comment reminded Sarah of how much her life had changed since that morning when she first noticed Marcus Webb's unusual access patterns. She had gone from being an invisible analyst to leading one of the Defense Department's most important security programs. More importantly, her work was directly protecting people who risked their lives in service to their country. That evening, Sarah walked through Arlington Cemetery, reflecting on the responsibility she carried. Every headstone represented someone who had given their life in military service, and many of those deaths had occurred because of compromised operations or inadequate intelligence security. Her work couldn't bring back those who had been lost, but it could help prevent future losses by protecting military personnel from betrayal by their own colleagues. Her secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from one of her analysts. Another potential insider threat had been identified at a joint special operations base in Europe. The investigation was just beginning, but preliminary indicators suggested another sophisticated recruitment operation. Sarah read the message and began mentally organizing the resources needed to support the investigation. The work never stopped, and the threats continued to evolve as hostile intelligence services developed new methods for targeting military personnel. But she had built a team and developed capabilities that could meet these challenges effectively. As she walked past the tomb of the unknown soldier, Sarah thought about all the warriors whose sacrifice was honored in this place. Her contribution was different from theirs, fought with computers and analytical skills rather than weapons and physical courage. But she was part of the same tradition of service, protecting those who protected others. The next morning would bring new challenges and new threats to investigate. Foreign intelligence services would continue trying to recruit American military personnel, and Sarah's team would continue working to detect and disrupt those efforts. It was a continuous battle fought in databases and communication intercepts, but it was no less important than battles fought on traditional battlefields. Sarah had found her calling in protecting those who served, using her analytical skills to identify threats that others missed. The quiet lieutenant who had once been invisible in the corridors of Naval Special Warfare Command had become one of the Defense Department's most important guardians, ensuring that America's warriors could trust the people fighting beside them. As she returned to her Pentagon office, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. It had started with noticing something that seemed wrong in an intelligence report and had led to uncovering one of the most significant security breaches in military history. But more than that, it had led to developing capabilities that would protect military personnel for years to come. The work was far from finished. New threats emerged constantly, and foreign intelligence services continued developing sophisticated methods for targeting American military personnel. But Sarah had built something lasting, a program and a team that would continue protecting warriors long after her own service ended. Looking out at the Washington skyline, Sarah felt proud of what she had accomplished, but knew that the most important measure of success would be the missions that succeeded because security breaches were prevented, the lives that were saved because insider threats were detected before they could do damage, and the trust that military personnel could maintain in their colleagues because the system was working to identify and remove those who had betrayed that trust. She had started as someone who was overlooked and invisible, but her quiet dedication to analytical excellence had made her one of the most important protectors of America's military forces. The girl who had always noticed what others missed had found her place in defending those who defended the nation.